Welcome back to Quid Pros Quo. I'm Rin.
And I'm Isa.
And this week we're going to be talking about the pre-writing process. So, pre-writing to me is one of the most fun parts of writing. Like, I love doing all the world building and the character building and the magic building.
Oh my gosh.
And the research and just everything
100%.
is like so fun.
It's so fun. And honestly, when I share my ideas and projects with people, I wish that I was just sharing the pre-write stuff.
Yes.
It's the most fun. It's what I'm the most passionate about, and
it's just so cool. People don't expect it to be perfect because it's pre-writing. And
plus, a bunch of it doesn't actually make it into the final draft or the final product, and so or maybe only a hint if it does.
Yes.
And so it sometimes feels like a shame to do all this work and then not be able to share it. So I'm excited that we're talking about this today.
Yes, that'd be so good. Maybe we can share a little bit of our favorite pre-writing.
To share about it. So.
Yeah, so we can just talk about ourselves a little bit too this episode, which will be fun.
I love that.
Okay. So one of my first things when I'm doing a pre-writing, or rather, I made this checklist and I use it for now every project. And I'll go through the checklist and check everything off right before I start the actual drafting process, which for me is when pre-writing ends. Though I think you could argue the pre-writing never ends because you're always going to go back and add to your character sheets or your other miscellaneous prep stuff and world building.
Pre-writing, I don't know. I kind of like to think of it almost as yes, there's this big pre-writing chunk before you start officially drafting, but technically anything that's kind of outside of that drafting process is pre-writing for the next time you draft.
Exactly.
So
I love that actually.
Pre-writing.
Everything is pre-writing and writing is rewriting.
That's true.
Yeah.
So true. But yeah, tell me more about this checklist because I don't have a checklist.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see how this is working for you.
So the first thing on my checklist is the world building setting. Have I built a world for the story to occur? And I think that's the foundation of the story. You have to have a good, believable world, or at least an exciting world, because I think it's Brandon Sanderson's zeroth law of magic. If it's really cool, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense.
That is certainly true.
And then I'm definitely a planner. So I need to have a plot outline, I need to have character sheets, I need to have a clear conflict. One thing that I think a lot of people don't really think about consciously but I do, is selecting your point of view or your point of view character. Because, I've struggled in the past with, what point of view do I want to write this? And I'm I love the idea of a third-person omniscient narrative, but, then I find it so hard to actually execute, so I find myself slipping to, third-person limited or rather third-person focused on just one character, even if I do occasionally hop into the heads of other characters. And then my final thing on the list is a magic system, and this has gone through a few iterations. I think I have a more recent one somewhere, but this one was easiest to find.
This version of your checklist.
This version of my checklist.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And the magic system is last on the checklist, but not necessarily the last thing I do, because a lot of times I'll conceptualize a cool magic system
and then make a story to showcase it?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
One idea I had with one of my stories is called Manu and the Mermaids. It's a kind of very twisted Little Mermaid retelling. It's gender bent and gay and twisted and just super fun. But I was wow, what if tattoos were magic and bestowed magical powers on people? And it's something that I feel I haven't seen a lot before. So
then you took this idea and then developed more around it, kind of?
Yes, exactly.
Or it was a good
foundation
or jumping
it was a good springboard.
Point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, there's my pre-writing checklist, and then we can go in more in depth in each bullet point if you want, or you could talk a little bit about your pre-writing process.
Well, okay, so most recently, I've been writing a lot of short stories, or just shorter, just snippets, excerpts, but except the rest of the work doesn't exist. So
I know, I get that. I do that too.
Yeah, so I think for that, I can't imagine myself implementing a checklist, but I kind of think of if I'm approaching writing and I know that I'm approaching writing sometimes my pre-writing process is like it definitely changes work to work. Like I kind of treat everything I do like a different beast.
Yes.
And that's just like the only way I can do it is to have no set way to do it. But I do have a lot of tricks that I do like to pull out. So one of those is if there is an idea that excites me, or just like a moment, a string of dialogue or something, I like to jot it down, and I kind of like to let it marinate a bit. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think this is helpful when you're like thinking of a specific scene, or if you're doing a shorter work where it's kind of more like the focus instead of, like if you're doing this larger novel, then there's a lot more threads at work there. And so if you just think of like one cool thing that's like a line of dialogue, your entire novel's probably not going to be centered around that one line of dialogue.
Absolutely.
As opposed to like if you thought of like a theme, or like you were saying, like specific world building elements. And so sometimes I have to take that idea that I get, and after like thinking about it for a bit, I just kind of do a little free write on it. And even if it's like a personal journal entry for the day and my idea is something completely unrelated, if it like morphs back around or whatever, I kind of do a bit of a free write to get me either more into like the space of it, to see if it's worth exploring, to see if there are other things that emerge that could be attached to it. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of lets me be creative, like pre-creative to the actual like creative process, so that I get excited to start or something. Let's see. One of the other things that I've done that I really enjoy doing is making a quick like bullet point list about whatever I'm going to be writing.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like case by case. Sometimes I just do it once and then I can like go off of that for like a longer work, and sometimes it's just every time before I start writing, it's just a little process. But basically what I'll do for that is not so much of a plot outline as like I'm just like, okay, this is an element that needs to be there, but so is this, and like if I have character A, then I need them to change in this way.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's super short, not all of them relate, but often that's enough for me to be like, okay, this is why I'm writing this. This is what I'm picking to explore. Because I find more often than not nowadays, I, like, especially in the short story realm, I'm much more interested in, like, a specific, like, character arc or a specific, like, character trait and how that would unfold, or, like, what that would lead to or inspire. And so especially when I'm writing short stories, those two are some of my favorite things to pull out for pre-writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that you talked about having different tools that you pull out for like different projects, and I totally do that too. Like I said, this is the easiest iteration of the list to find because it's like the first page in this notebook, but like probably 10 pages back from where I am right now, I have a different version of it for my NaNoWriMo book. So it's definitely like projects are each unique, so you need a unique way of handling each one.
That's true. Pre-writing does not have to be one size fits all, person to person or project to project.
Exactly. Let's see. What would you say is your favorite tool if you haven't already talked about it?
Oh gosh.
Like what's your favorite bit of pre-writing?
Tool? Oh gosh. Okay. So for my larger work that I'm currently exploring and pre-writing for.
Yeah.
I have taken, so I had this like really big sketchbook, and while I do love art, what I actually use the sketchbook for is to write on these giant pages that have no lines, and I can draw diagrams, do whatever the heck I want, and it's so freeing. So for this larger work that I'm currently working on, I've taken several pages of this sketchbook out, and I've written, like, okay, so here are, like, everything that I could possibly think of about, like, I don't know, lore. Or, like, here's, like, everything that I could probably use as, like, a character name bank. Because I decide when I'm going into it, I'm like, okay, like, what's the vibe? Like, what do I actually need to, like, get at here? And, like, what would sound correct? And then I'll, like, put it all in this thing. That's not something that I've done for every single work.
Yeah.
But basically, how it ended up is that I have all of these big, like, pages, and then, like, I can tape them all up onto my wall and just, like, look at it.
Yes.
And it's just exciting to me.
That's so fun.
Because then I can, like, visualize all these, like, different ideas that aren't necessarily, like, plot related or something. And then I'm just, like...
connected.
Yeah, they're at least, like, connected. And then... So basically, I just, like... These kind of, like, brainstorming pages. But they're, like, the next step after brainstorming for me. Like, they're a little bit more organized.
They're, like,
into,
expanding
like,
on the brainstorming.
everything in this category is, like, on this page.
Yes.
Anyways,
very cool.
So I just kind of like to categorize things out so I can just look at all of these elements that I might want to include.
Yeah.
And then when I'm writing, if I'm like stumped, then I can just like look back at it and be like, oh, like this is kind of what was exciting to me about the project in the first place.
And I think like finding what's exciting to you about a project in the first place is such a good way to like renew that spark of joy whenever you're like in the middle of the like writing process, like, you know, the murky middle, I think as they call it. Or whatever the turn of phrase is.
Right.
Some alliteration with the word middle and how terrible it is. Middles of the novel are hard.
Oh my gosh. Yes, they are.
But yeah, my favorite tool is very similar. I also have a notebook. It's not very big. It's like, I don't know, what do you call it? 6x8? If that.
Maybe.
Something
I don't know.
Like that. I'm not good with size.
Neither am I.
But I do a similar thing in this notebook, but when this notebook just is not enough space, I will, like, check out a room in, like, the library with a whiteboard, and they have, like, these huge whiteboards, and then I, like, bring lots of colors of expo markers.
Oh,
and
it's so lovely.
Just write, and if I'm at a good stage in the process to get other people's input, like, if I'm stuck or something, I love getting input from both my writer friends and not my writer friends, because, like, writer friends will have a good ways to, like, make the story go, but the non-writer friends will just have really cool ideas of things to throw in. So I love,
that's
like...
so true.
Crowdsourcing, maybe?
You know what? I think that's a really good part of the pre-writing, because ultimately, your work is perhaps going to be read by somebody other than yourself.
Hopefully.
And so it can be good to get input. Like, ultimately, even if you're, like, writing this piece for you...
Yes.
Like, it's a good way... I always find that having conversations with people, or even just talking at somebody, clarifies so many things for me about, like, what I'm going to be doing in my actual writing.
Yeah. And
it just solidifies ideas left and right, so I totally think that's a good tool. Charting and crowdsourcing.
Yes.
I really think...
I love that. It's alliterated.
It is. It is. Well, pretty much.
Pretty much. Anyways, very cool. I think my last piece of advice, and this goes a little bit out of the pre-writing process, but like you said, pre-writing during your draft is just pre-writing for the next draft.
That's so true.
I have done this thing called a reverse outline, and it's where after you finish the chapter, you go into like an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and you write like what happened in the chapter.
Like versus like what you planned to put into it. Once you have the product, like putting like plot beats or like...
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's like, it's been so helpful to me when I go back and like revise and rewrite, because I'm just able to like, you know, look at what actually happened. I don't necessarily have to read everything word for word again if I'm just trying, and I don't have to like scroll through 300 pages
it's like
in Google
at a
Docs.
Glance, what is actually in your writing.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that's all my advice.
Yeah, that kind of sums up mine too, because honestly, a lot of this was through experimentation and whatever kind of feels like it would be like creatively motivating for whatever piece I'm working on.
It's like throwing a bunch of gummy hands at the wall, like the gummy
Which
sticky
one
hands.
sticks?
Yeah, exactly.
And
which
stick
one
with
sticks?
that guy.
Yeah,
He's
and
the
stick
one.
with that one. Like maybe it's the blue one, and that works really well for you.
I was envisioning the yellow one.
Oh, the
that
yellow
just
one?
goes to show.
That it's different for everyone.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, anyways, thank you so much for listening, everyone. This has been Quid Pros Quo. Join us next time when we talk about drafting versus revision.